You click to uncover the legend of Arsène Lupin, and you're in the right place. We're diving deep into how this gentleman thief became a sensation, starting with his impossible beginnings. But who is this elusive figure who outsmarted the best? From his audacious arrest to his shocking prison break, Lupin's story is packed with twists that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about crime. We'll explore why a master criminal became France's most beloved anti-hero, and reveal the clever details behind his most famous early escapes. How did he pull off the impossible, time and time again? And what makes his creator, Maurice Leblanc, such a genius at crafting these intricate puzzles? We're not just telling you what happened, but how Lupin redefined the art of the heist. Stick around as we unveil the secrets of the original Lupin. If you're ready to unravel the mystery, make sure to like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into literary legends. Chapter 1. The Arrest of Arsène Lupin. It was a strange end to a voyage that had begun so well. The transatlantic steamship La Provence was a swift, comfortable vessel, commanded by a most affable man. The passengers formed a select and delightful society. The charm of new acquaintances and spontaneous amusements made the time pass agreeably. We enjoyed the pleasant sensation of being separated from the world, living, as it were, upon an unknown island, and consequently obliged to be sociable with each other. Have you ever considered how much originality and spontaneity come from these various individuals who, the evening before, didn't even know each other? And now, for several days, they're condemned to live a life of extreme intimacy, jointly defying the anger of the ocean, the terrible onslaught of the waves, the violence of the tempest, and the agonizing monotony of the calm, sleepy water. Such a life becomes a sort of tragic existence, with its storms and its grandeur, its monotony and its diversity. And that's why, perhaps, we embark upon that short voyage with mingled feelings of pleasure and fear. But, during the past few years, a new sensation had been added to the life of the transatlantic traveller. The little floating island is now attached to the world from which it was once quite free. A bond united them, even in the very heart of the Atlantic's watery wastes. That bond is the wireless telegraph, by means of which we receive news in the most mysterious manner. We know full well that the message isn't transported by a hollow wire. No, the mystery is even more inexplicable, more romantic, and we must turn to the wings of the air to explain this new miracle. During the first day of the voyage, we felt we were being followed, escorted, even preceded by that distant voice, which, from time to time, whispered to one of us a few words from the receding world. 2 friends spoke to me. 10, 20 others sent gay or sombre words of parting to other passengers. On the second day, 500 miles from the French coast, in the midst of a violent storm, we received the following message by wireless telegraph. Arsène Lupin is on your vessel, first cabin, blonde hair, wounded right forearm, travelling alone under the name of R. At that moment, a terrible flash of lightning rent the stormy skies. The electric waves were interrupted. The rest of the dispatch never reached us. Of the name under which Arsène Lupin was concealing himself, we knew only the initial. If the news had been of some other character, I have no doubt the secret would have been carefully guarded by the telegraphic operator, as well as by the officers of the vessel. But it was one of those events calculated to escape from the most rigorous discretion. That same day, no one knew how, the incident became a matter of current gossip, and every passenger was aware that the famous Arsène Lupin was hiding in our midst. Arsène Lupin in our midst, the irresponsible burglar whose exploits had been narrated in all the newspapers during the past few months, the mysterious individual with whom Ganimard, our shrewdest detective, had been engaged in an implacable conflict amidst interesting and picturesque surroundings. Arsène Lupin, the eccentric gentleman who operates only in the chateaux and salons, and who, one night, entered the residence of Baron Scorman, but emerged empty-handed, leaving, however, his card on which he had scribbled these words: "Arsène Lupin, gentleman burglar, will return when the furniture is genuine." Arsène Lupin, the man of 1,000 disguises, in turn a chauffeur, detective, bookmaker, Russian physician, Spanish bullfighter, commercial traveller, robust youth, or decrepit old man. Then consider this startling situation. Arsène Lupin was wandering about within the limited bounds of a transatlantic steamer, in that very small corner of the world, in that dining saloon, in that smoking room, in that music room. Arsène Lupin was, perhaps, this gentleman, or that one, my neighbour at the table, the sharer of my stateroom. "And this condition of affairs will last for 5 days," exclaimed Miss Nelly Underdown the next morning. "It is unbearable. I hope he will be arrested." Then, addressing me, she added, "And you, Monsieur d'Andrécy, you are on intimate terms with the captain. Surely you know something? I should have been delighted had I possessed any information that would interest Miss Nelly. She was one of those magnificent creatures who inevitably attracted attention in every assembly. Wealth and beauty form an irresistible combination, and Nelly possessed both. Educated in Paris under the care of a French mother, she was now going to visit her father, the millionaire Underdown of Chicago. She was accompanied by one of her friends, Lady Jerland. At first I had decided to open a flirtation with her, but in the rapidly growing intimacy of the voyage I was soon impressed by her charming manner, and my feelings became too deep and reverential for a mere flirtation. Moreover, she accepted my attention with a certain degree of favour. She condescended to laugh at my witticisms and display an interest in my stories. Yet I felt that I had a rival in the person of a young man with quiet and refined tastes, and it struck me at times that she preferred his taciturn humour to my Parisian frivolity. He formed one in the circle of admirers that surrounded Miss Nelly at the time she addressed to me the foregoing question. We were all comfortably seated in our deck-chairs. The storm of the preceding evening had cleared the sky. The weather was now delightful. "I have no definite knowledge, mademoiselle," I replied, "but cannot we ourselves investigate the mystery quite as well as the detective Ganimard, the personal enemy of Arsène Lupin?" Oh, you are progressing very fast, monsieur." "Not at all, mademoiselle. In the first place, let me ask, do you find the problem a complicated one?" "Very complicated." "Have you forgotten the key we hold for the solution to the problem?" "What key?" "In the first place, Lupin calls himself Monsieur R. Rather vague information," she replied. "Secondly, he is travelling alone. Does that help you?" she asked. "Thirdly, he is blonde." "Well, then we have only to peruse the passenger list and proceed by process of elimination." I had that list in my pocket. I took it out and glanced through it. Then I remarked, "I find that there are only 13 men on the passenger list whose names begin with the letter R." "Only 13?" "Yes, in the first cabin. And of those 13, I find that 9 of them are accompanied by women, children, or servants. That leaves only 4 who are travelling alone. First, the Marquis de Raverdan. What is his name? Monsieur Rozaine. Does anyone know him? No one answered. But Miss Nelly turned to the taciturn young man whose attentions to her had annoyed me, and said, "Well, Monsieur Rozaine, why do you not answer?" All eyes were now turned upon him. He was a blonde. I must confess that I myself felt a shock of surprise, and the profound silence that followed her question indicated that the others present also viewed the situation with a feeling of sudden alarm. However, the idea was an absurd one, because the gentleman in question presented an air of the most perfect innocence. "Why do I not answer?" he said. "Because, considering my name, my position as a solitary traveller, and the colour of my hair, I have already reached the same conclusion, and now think that I should be arrested." He presented a strange appearance as he uttered these words. His thin lips were drawn closer than usual, and his face was ghastly pale, whilst his eyes were streaked with blood. Of course, he was joking, yet his appearance and attitude impressed us strangely. "But you have not the wound," said Miss Nelly naively. "That is true," he replied. "I lack the wound." Then he pulled up his sleeve, removed his cuff, and showed us his arm. But that action did not deceive me. He had shown us his left arm, and I was on the point of calling his attention to the fact, when another incident diverted our attention. Lady Jerland, Miss Nelly's friend, came running towards us in a state of great excitement, exclaiming, "My jewels, my pearls! Someone has stolen them all." No, they were not all gone, as we soon found out. The thief had taken only part of them, a very curious thing. Of the diamond sunbursts, jewelled pendants, bracelets, and necklaces, the thief had taken, not the largest, but the finest and most valuable stones. The mountings were lying upon the table. I saw them there, despoiled of their jewels, like flowers from which the beautiful coloured petals had been ruthlessly plucked. And this theft must have been committed at the time Lady Jerland was taking her tea, in broad daylight, in a stateroom opening on a much-frequented corridor. Moreover, the thief had been obliged to force open the door of the stateroom, search for the jewel case, which was hidden at the bottom of a hat-box, open it, select his booty, and remove it from the mountings. Of course, all the passengers instantly reached the same conclusion. It was the work of Arsène Lupin. That day, at the dinner-table, the seats to the right and left of Rozaine remained vacant, and during the evening it was rumoured that the captain had placed him under arrest, which information produced a feeling of safety and relief. We breathed once more. That evening we resumed our games and dances. Miss Nelly, especially, displayed a spirit of thoughtless gaiety which convinced me that if Rozaine's attentions had been agreeable to her in the beginning, she had already forgotten them. Her charm and good humour completed my conquest. At midnight, under a bright moon, I declared my devotion with an ardour that did not seem to displease her. But the next day, to our general amazement, Rozaine was at liberty. We learned that the evidence against him was not sufficient. He had produced documents that were perfectly regular, which showed that he was the son of a wealthy merchant of Bordeaux. Besides, his arms did not bear the slightest trace of a wound. "Documents! Certificates of birth!" exclaimed the enemies of Rozaine. "Of course, Arsène Lupin will furnish you as many as you desire. And as to the wound, he never had it, or he has removed it." Then it was proven that, at the time of the theft, Rozaine was promenading on the deck. To which fact, his enemies replied that a man like Arsène Lupin could commit a crime without being actually present. And then, apart from all other circumstances, there remained one point which even the most sceptical could not answer. Who, except Rosaine, was travelling alone, was a blonde, and bore a name beginning with R? To whom did the telegram point, if it were not Rosaine? And when Rosaine, a few minutes before breakfast, came boldly toward our group, Miss Nelly and Lady Jerland arose and walked away. An hour later, a manuscript circular was passed from hand to hand amongst the sailors, the stewards, and the passengers of all classes. It announced that Monsieur Louis Rosaine offered a reward of 10,000 francs for the discovery of Arsène Lupin or any other person in possession of the stolen jewels. And if no one assists me, I will unmask the scoundrel myself, declared Rosaine. Rosaine against Arsène Lupin, or rather, according to current opinion, Arsène Lupin himself against Arsène Lupin. The contest promised to be interesting. Nothing developed during the next 2 days. We saw Rosaine wandering about, day and night, searching, questioning, and investigating. The captain, also, displayed commendable activity. He caused the vessel to be searched from stem to stern, ransacked every stateroom under the plausible theory that the jewels might be concealed anywhere, except in the thief's own room. "I suppose they will find out something soon," remarked Miss Nelly to me. "He may be a wizard, but he cannot make diamonds and pearls become invisible." "Certainly not," I replied, "but he should examine the lining of our hats and vests and everything we carry with us." Then, exhibiting my Kodak, a 9 by 12 with which I had been photographing her in various poses, I added, "In an apparatus no larger than that, a person could hide all of Lady Jerland's jewels. He could pretend to take pictures, and no one would suspect the game. But I have heard it said that every thief leaves some clue behind him." "That may be generally true," I replied, "but there is one exception, Arsène Lupin." "Why?" "Because he concentrates his thoughts not only on the theft, but on all the circumstances connected with it that could serve as a clue to his identity." "A few days ago you were more confident." "Yes, but since then I have seen him at work." "And what do you think about it now?" she asked. "Well, in my opinion, we are wasting our time." And, as a matter of fact, the investigation had produced no result. But, in the meantime, the captain's watch had been stolen. He was furious. He quickened his efforts and watched Rosaine more closely than before. But, on the following day, the watch was found in the second officer's collar box. This incident caused considerable astonishment, and displayed the humorous side of Arsène Lupin, burglar though he was, but dilettante as well. He combined business with pleasure. He reminded us of the author who almost died in a fit of laughter provoked by his own play. Certainly, he was an artist in his particular line of work, and whenever I saw Rosaine, gloomy and reserved, and thought of the double rôle that he was playing, I accorded him a certain measure of admiration. On the following evening, the officer on deck duty heard groans emanating from the darkest corner of the ship. He approached and found a man lying there, his head enveloped in a thick grey scarf and his hands tied together with a heavy cord. It was Rosaine. He had been assaulted, thrown down and robbed. A card, pinned to his coat, bore these words: "Arsène Lupin accepts with pleasure the 10,000 francs offered by Monsieur Rosaine." As a matter of fact, the stolen pocket-book contained 20,000 francs. Of course, some accused the unfortunate man of having simulated this attack on himself. But, apart from the fact that he could not have bound himself in that manner, it was established that the writing on the card was entirely different from that of Rosaine, but, on the contrary, resembled the handwriting of Arsène Lupin as it was reproduced in an old newspaper found on board. Thus it appeared that Rosaine was not Arsène Lupin, but was Rosaine, the son of a Bordeaux merchant, and the presence of Arsène Lupin was once more affirmed, and that in a most alarming manner. Such was the state of terror amongst the passengers that none would remain alone in a stateroom or wander singly in unfrequented parts of the vessel. We clung together as a matter of safety, and yet the most intimate acquaintances were estranged by a mutual feeling of distrust. Arsène Lupin was, now, anybody and everybody. Our excited imaginations attributed to him miraculous and unlimited power. We supposed him capable of assuming the most unexpected disguises, of being, by turns, the highly respectable Major Rawson or the noble Marquis de Raverdan, or even, for we no longer stopped with the accusing letter of R, or even such a person well known to all of us, and having wife, children, and servants. The first wireless dispatches from America brought no news. At least, the captain did not communicate any to us. The silence was not reassuring. Our last day on the steamer seemed interminable. We lived in constant fear of some disaster. This time it would not be a simple theft or a comparatively harmless assault. It would be a crime, a murder. No one imagined that Arsène Lupin would confine himself to those two trifling offences. Absolute master of the ship, the authorities powerless, he could do whatever he pleased. Our property and lives were at his mercy. Yet those were delightful hours for me, since they secured to me the confidence of Miss Nelly. Deeply moved by those startling events, and being of a highly nervous nature, she spontaneously sought at my side a protection and security that I was pleased to give her. Inwardly, I blessed Arsène Lupin. Had he not been the means of bringing me and Miss Nelly closer to each other? Thanks to him, I could now indulge in delicious dreams of love and happiness, dreams that, I felt, were not unwelcome to Miss Nelly. Her smiling eyes authorized me to make them. The softness of her voice bade me hope. As we approached the American shore, the active search for the thief was apparently abandoned, and we were anxiously awaiting the supreme moment in which the mysterious enigma would be explained. Who was Arsène Lupin? Under what name, under what disguise was the famous Arsène Lupin concealing himself? And, at last, that supreme moment arrived. If I live 100 years, I shall not forget the slightest details of it. "How pale you are, Miss Nelly," I said to my companion, as she leaned upon my arm, almost fainting. "And you," she replied, "ah, you are so changed. Just think. This is a most exciting moment, and I am delighted to spend it with you, Miss Nelly. I hope that your memory will sometimes revert." But she was not listening. She was nervous and excited. The gangway was placed in position, but before we could use it, the uniformed customs officers came on board. Miss Nelly murmured, "I shouldn't be surprised to hear that Arsène Lupin escaped from the vessel during the voyage. Perhaps he preferred death to dishonour, and plunged into the Atlantic rather than be arrested." "Oh, do not laugh," she said. Suddenly I started, and in answer to her question I said, "Do you see that little old man standing at the bottom of the gangway, with an umbrella and an olive-green coat? It is Ganimard." "Ganimard!" "Yes, the celebrated detective who has sworn to capture Arsène Lupin. Ah, I can understand now why we did not receive any news from this side of the Atlantic. Ganimard was here, and he always keeps his business secret. Then you think he will arrest Arsène Lupin? Who can tell? The unexpected always happens when Arsène Lupin is involved in the affair. "Oh!" she exclaimed, with that morbid curiosity peculiar to women. "I would like to see him arrested." "You will have to be patient. No doubt, Arsène Lupin has already seen his enemy, and will not be in a hurry to leave the steamer." The passengers were now leaving the steamer. Leaning on his umbrella, with an air of careless indifference, Ganimard appeared to be paying no attention to the crowd that was hurrying down the gangway. The Marquis de Raverdan, Major Rawson, the Italian revolter, and many others had already left the vessel before Rozaine appeared. "Poor Rozaine! Perhaps it is he, after all," said Miss Nelly to me. "What do you think?" "I think it would be very interesting to have Ganimard and Rozaine in the same picture. You take the camera. I am loaded down." I gave her the camera, but it was too late for her to use it. Rozaine was already passing the detective. An American officer, standing behind Ganimard, leaned forward and whispered in his ear. The French detective shrugged his shoulders, and Rozaine passed on. Then, my God, who was Arsène Lupin? "Yes," said Miss Nelly aloud. "Who can it be?" Not more than 20 people now remained on board. She scrutinized them one by one, fearful that Arsène Lupin was not amongst them. "We cannot wait much longer," I said to her. She started toward the gangway. I followed. But we had not taken 10 steps when Ganimard barred our passage. "Well, what is it?" I exclaimed. "One moment, monsieur. What's your hurry? I am escorting mademoiselle." "One moment," he repeated, in a tone of authority. Then, gazing into my eyes, he said, "Arsène Lupin, is it not?" I laughed and replied, "No, simply Bernard d'Andrécy. Bernard d'Andrécy died in Macedonia 3 years ago. If Bernard d'Andrécy were dead, I would not be here. But you are mistaken. Here are my papers. They are his, and I can tell you exactly how they came into your possession." "You are a fool!" I exclaimed. "Arsène Lupin sailed under the name of R. Yes, another of your tricks, a false scent that deceived them at Le Havre. You play a good game, my boy, but this time luck is against you." I hesitated a moment. Then he hit me with a sharp blow on the right arm, which caused me to utter a cry of pain. He had struck the wound, yet unhealed, referred to in the telegram. I was obliged to surrender. There was no alternative. I turned to Miss Nelly, who had heard everything. Our eyes met. Then she glanced at the kodak I had placed in her hands, and made a gesture that conveyed to me the impression that she understood everything. Yes, there, between the narrow folds of black leather, in the hollow centre of the small object that I had taken the precaution to place in her hands before Ganimard arrested me, it was there I had deposited Rozaine's 20,000 francs and Lady Jerland's pearls and diamonds. Oh, I pledge my oath that, at that solemn moment, when I was in the grasp of Ganimard and his 2 assistants, I was perfectly indifferent to everything, to my arrest, the hostility of the people, everything, except this one question: what will Miss Nelly do with the things I had confided to her? In the absence of that material and conclusive proof, I had nothing to fear, but would Miss Nelly decide to furnish that proof? Would she betray me? Would she act the part of an enemy who cannot forgive, or that of a woman whose scorn is softened by feelings of indulgence and involuntary sympathy? She passed in front of me. I said nothing, but bowed very low. Mingled with the other passengers, she advanced to the gangway with my kodak in her hand. It occurred to me that she would not dare to expose me publicly, but she might do so when she reached a more private place. However, when she had passed only a few feet down the gangway, with a movement of simulated awkwardness, she let the camera fall into the water between the vessel and the pier. Then she walked down the gangway, and was quickly lost to sight in the crowd. She had passed out of my life forever. For a moment I stood motionless. Then, to Ganimard's great astonishment, I muttered, "What a pity that I am not an honest man." Such was the story of his arrest as narrated to me by Arsène Lupin himself. The various incidents, which I shall record in writing at a later day, have established certain ties between us. Shall I say of friendship? Yes, I venture to believe that Arsène Lupin honours me with his friendship, and that it is through friendship that he occasionally calls on me, and brings, into the silence of my library, his youthful exuberance of spirits, the contagion of his enthusiasm, and the mirth of a man for whom destiny has naught but favours and smiles. His portrait? How can I describe him? I have seen him 20 times, and each time he was a different person. Even he himself said to me on one occasion, "I no longer know who I am. I cannot recognize myself in the mirror." Certainly, he was a great actor, and possessed a marvellous faculty for disguising himself. Without the slightest effort, he could adopt the voice, gestures, and mannerisms of another person. "Why," he said, "why should I retain a definite form and feature? Why not avoid the danger of a personality that is ever the same? My actions will serve to identify me." Then he added, with a touch of pride, "So much the better if no one can ever say with absolute certainty, 'There is Arsène Lupin.' The essential point is that the public may be able to refer to my work and say, without fear of mistake, 'Arsène Lupin did that.'" Chapter 2. Arsène Lupin in Prison. There isn't a tourist worthy of the name who doesn't know the banks of the Seine, and hasn't noticed, in passing, the little feudal castle of Malocchis, built upon a rock in the centre of the river. An arched bridge connects it with the shore. All around it, the calm waters of the great river play peacefully amongst the reeds, and the wagtails flutter over the moist crests of the stones. The history of the Malocchis castle is stormy like its name, harsh like its outlines. It has passed through a long series of combats, sieges, assaults, rapine, and massacres. A recital of the crimes committed there would make the stoutest heart tremble. There are many mysterious legends connected with the castle, and they tell us of a famous subterranean tunnel that formerly led to the Abbey of Jumièges and to the manor of Agnes Sorel, mistress of Charles VII. In that ancient habitation of heroes and brigands, Baron Nathan Cahorn now lived, or Baron Satan, as he was formerly called on the Bourse, where he had acquired a fortune with incredible rapidity. The lords of Malocchis, absolutely ruined, had been obliged to sell the ancient castle at a great sacrifice. It contained an admirable collection of furniture, pictures, wood carvings, and faience. The Baron lived there alone, attended by 3 old servants. No one ever enters the place. No one had ever beheld the 3 Rubens that he possessed, his 2 Watteaus, his Jean Goujon pulpit, and the many other treasures he had acquired by a vast expenditure of money at public sales. Baron Satan lived in constant fear, not for himself, but for the treasures he had accumulated with such earnest devotion and so much perspicacity that the shrewdest merchant could not say the Baron had ever erred in his taste or judgment. He loved them, his bibelots. He loved them intensely, like a miser, jealously, like a lover. Every day, at sunset, the iron gates at either end of the bridge and at the entrance to the Court of Honour are closed and barred. At the least touch on these gates, Electric bells will ring throughout the castle. One Thursday in September, a letter carrier presented himself at the gate at the head of the bridge, and, as usual, it was the Baron himself who partially opened the heavy portal. He scrutinized the man as minutely as if he were a stranger, although the honest face and twinkling eyes of the postman had been familiar to the Baron for many years. The man laughed as he said, "It is only I, Monsieur le Baron. It is not another man wearing my cap and blouse." "One can never tell," muttered the Baron. The man handed him a number of newspapers, and then said, "And now, Monsieur le Baron, here is something new." "Something new?" "Yes, a letter. A registered letter." Living as a recluse, without friends or business relations, the Baron never received any letters, and the one now presented to him immediately aroused within him a feeling of suspicion and distrust. It was like an evil omen. Who was this mysterious correspondent that dared to disturb the tranquillity of his retreat? "You must sign for it, Monsieur le Baron." He signed, then took the letter, waited until the postman had disappeared beyond the bend in the road, and, after walking nervously to and fro for a few minutes, he leaned against the parapet of the bridge and opened the envelope. It contained a sheet of paper, bearing this heading, "Prison de la Santé, Paris." He looked at the signature, "Arsène Lupin." Then he read, "Monsieur le Baron, there is, in the gallery in your castle, a picture of Philippe de Champagne, of exquisite finish, which pleases me beyond measure. Your Rubens are also to my taste, as well as your smallest Watteau. In the salon to the right, I noticed the Louis XIII cadence table, the tapestries of Beauvais, the Empire guerdon signed Jacob, and the Renaissance chest. In the salon to the left, all the cabinets are full of jewels and miniatures. For the present, I will content myself with those articles that can be conveniently removed. I will therefore ask you to pack them carefully and ship them to me, charges prepaid, to the station at Batignolles, within 8 days. Otherwise I shall be obliged to remove them myself during the night of September 27th. But, under those circumstances, I shall not content myself with the articles above mentioned. Accept my apologies for any inconvenience I may cause you, and believe me to be your humble servant, Arsène Lupin. P. Estet. Please do not send the largest Watteau. Although you paid 30,000 francs for it, it is only a copy, the original having been burned under the Directoire by Barras during a night of debauchery. Consult the memoirs of Garrett. I do not care for the Louis XV chatelaine, as I doubt its authenticity. That letter completely upset the Baron. Had it borne any other signature, he would have been greatly alarmed, but signed by Arsène Lupin. As an habitual reader of the newspapers, he was versed in the history of recent crimes, and was therefore well acquainted with the exploits of the mysterious burglar. Of course, he knew that Lupin had been arrested in America by his enemy Ganimard, and was at present incarcerated in the Prison de la Santé. But he knew also that any miracle might be expected from Arsène Lupin. Moreover, that exact knowledge of the castle, the location of the pictures and furniture, gave the affair an alarming aspect. How could he have acquired that information concerning things that no one had ever seen? The Baron raised his eyes and contemplated the stern outlines of the castle, its steep rocky pedestal, the depth of the surrounding water, and shrugged his shoulders. Certainly, there was no danger. No one in the world could force an entrance to the sanctuary that contained his priceless treasures. No one, perhaps, but Arsène Lupin. For him, gates, walls, and drawbridges did not exist. What use were the most formidable obstacles or the most careful precautions, if Arsène Lupin had decided to effect an entrance? That evening he wrote to the prosecutor of the Republic at Rouen. He enclosed the threatening letter and solicited aid and protection. The reply came at once to the effect that Arsène Lupin was in custody in the prison de la Santé, under close surveillance, with no opportunity to write such a letter, which was, no doubt, the work of some impostor. But, as an act of precaution, the prosecutor had submitted the letter to an expert in handwriting, who declared that, in spite of certain resemblances, the writing was not that of the prisoner. But the words, in spite of certain resemblances, caught the attention of the Baron. In them he read the possibility of a doubt which appeared to him quite sufficient to warrant the intervention of the law. His fears increased. He read Lupin's letter over and over again. "I shall be obliged to remove them myself." And then there was the fixed date, the night of September 27th. To confide in his servants was a proceeding repugnant to his nature. But now, for the first time in many years, he experienced the necessity of seeking counsel with someone. Abandoned by the legal official of his own district, and feeling unable to defend himself with his own resources, he was on the point of going to Paris to engage the services of a detective. 2 days passed. On the third day he was filled with hope and joy as he read the following item in the Réveil de Caudebec, a newspaper published in a neighbouring town. "We have the pleasure of entertaining in our city, at the present time, the veteran detective Monsieur Ganimard, who acquired a world-wide reputation by his clever capture of Arsène Lupin. He has come here for rest and recreation, and, being an enthusiastic fisherman, he threatens to capture all the fish in our river." Ganimard! Ah! Here was the assistance desired by Baron Cahorn. Who could baffle the schemes of Arsène Lupin better than Ganimard, the patient and astute detective? He was the man for the place. The Baron did not hesitate. The town of Caudebec was only 6 kilometres from the castle, a short distance for a man whose step was accelerated by the hope of safety. After several fruitless attempts to ascertain the detective's address, the Baron visited the office of the Réveil, situated on the quay. There he found the writer of the article, who, approaching the window, exclaimed, "Ganimard? Why, you are sure to see him somewhere on the quay with his fishing pole. I met him there, and chanced to read his name engraved on his rod. Ah, there he is now, under the trees. That little man, wearing a straw hat? Exactly. He is a gruff fellow, with little to say." 5 minutes later, the Baron approached the celebrated Ganimard, introduced himself, and sought to commence a conversation, but that was a failure. Then he broached the real object of his interview, and briefly stated his case. The other listened, motionless, with his attention riveted on his fishing rod. When the Baron had finished his story, the fisherman turned, with an air of profound pity, and said, "Monsieur, it is not customary for thieves to warn people they are about to rob. Arsène Lupin, especially, would not commit such a folly. But, monsieur, if I had the least doubt, believe me, the pleasure of again capturing Arsène Lupin would place me at your disposal. But, unfortunately, that young man is already under lock and key. He may have escaped. No one ever escaped from the Santé. But he, no more than any other. Yet, well, if he escapes, so much the better. I will catch him again. Meanwhile, you go home and sleep soundly. That will do for the present. You frighten the fish." The conversation ended. The Baron returned to the castle, reassured to some extent by Ganimard's indifference. He examined the bolts, watched the servants, and during the next 48 hours he became almost persuaded that his fears were groundless. Certainly, as Ganimard had said, thieves do not warn people they are about to rob. The fateful day was close at hand. It was now the 26th of September, and nothing had happened. But at 3 o'clock the bell rang. A boy brought this telegram: "No goods at Batignolles station. Prepare everything for tomorrow night. Arsène." This telegram threw the Baron into such a state of excitement that he even considered the advisability of yielding to Lupin's demands. However, he hastened to Caudebec. Ganimard was fishing at the same place, seated on a camp-stool. Without a word, he handed him the telegram. "Well, what of it?" said the detective. "What of it? But it is tomorrow." "What is tomorrow?" "The robbery, the pillage of my collections." Ganimard laid down his fishing-rod, turned to the Baron, and exclaimed in a tone of impatience, "Ah, do you think I am going to bother myself about such a silly story as that? How much do you ask to pass tomorrow night in the castle?" "Not a soul. Now, leave me alone. Name your own price. I am rich and can pay it." This offer disconcerted Ganimard, who replied, calmly, "I am here on a vacation. I have no right to undertake such work. No one will know. I promise to keep it a secret." "Oh, nothing will happen. Come, 3,000 francs. Will that be enough?" The detective, after a moment's reflection, said, "Very well. But I must warn you that you are throwing your money out of the window." "I do not care." "In that case. But, after all, what do we know about this devil Lupin? He may have quite a numerous band of robbers with him. Are you sure of your servants?" "My faith! Better not count on them. I will telegraph for 2 of my men to help me. And now go. It is better for us not to be seen together. Tomorrow evening at about 9 o'clock." The following day, the date fixed by Arsène Lupin, Baron Cahorn arranged all his panoply of war, furbished his weapons, and like a sentinel paced to and fro in front of the castle. He saw nothing, heard nothing. At 8:30 o'clock in the evening he dismissed his servants. They occupied rooms in a wing of the building, in a retired spot, well removed from the main portion of the castle. Shortly thereafter, the Baron heard the sound of approaching footsteps. It was Ganimard and his 2 assistants, great powerful fellows with immense hands and necks like bulls. After asking a few questions relating to the location of the various entrances and rooms, Ganimard carefully closed and barricaded all the doors and windows through which one could gain access to the threatened rooms. He inspected the walls, raised the tapestries, and finally installed his assistants in the central gallery, which was located between the 2 salons. "No nonsense. We are not here to sleep. At the slightest sound, open the windows of the court and call me. Pay attention also to the waterside. 10 meters of perpendicular rock is no obstacle to those devils." Ganimard locked his assistants in the gallery, carried away the keys, and said to the Baron, "And now to our post." He had chosen for himself a small room located in the thick outer wall, between the 2 principal doors, and which, in former years, had been the watchman's quarters. A peep-hole opened upon the bridge, another on the court. In one corner, there was an opening to a tunnel. Yes. Then, unless there is some other entrance, known only to Arsène Lupin, we are quite safe. He placed 3 chairs together, stretched himself upon them, lighted his pipe, and sighed. Really, Monsieur le Baron, I feel ashamed to accept your money for such a sinecure as this. I will tell the story to my friend Lupin. He will enjoy it immensely. The Baron did not laugh. He was anxiously listening, but heard nothing save the beating of his own heart. From time to time, he leaned over the tunnel and cast a fearful eye into its depths. He heard the clock strike 11, 12, 1. Suddenly, he seized Ganimard's arm. The latter leaped up, awakened from his sleep. "Do you hear?" asked the Baron in a whisper. "Yes." "What is it?" "I was snoring, I suppose." "No, no, listen." "Ah, yes, it is the horn of an automobile." "Well, well." "It is very improbable that Lupin would use an automobile like a battering ram to demolish your castle. Come, Monsieur le Baron, return to your post. I am going to sleep. Good night." That was the only alarm. Ganimard resumed his interrupted slumbers, and the Baron heard nothing except the regular snoring of his companion. At break of day they left the room. The castle was enveloped in a profound calm. It was a peaceful dawn on the bosom of a tranquil river. They mounted the stairs, Cahorn radiant with joy, Ganimard calm as usual. They heard no sound. They saw nothing to arouse suspicion. "What did I tell you, Monsieur le Baron? Really, I should not have accepted your offer. I am ashamed." He unlocked the door and entered the gallery. Upon 2 chairs, with drooping heads and pendant arms, the detective's 2 assistants were asleep. "Thunder and blazes!" exclaimed Ganimard. At the same moment, the Baron cried out, "The pictures! The credence!" He stammered, choked, with arms outstretched toward the empty places, toward the denuded walls where naught remained but the useless nails and cords. The Watteau disappeared. The Rubens carried away. The tapestries taken down. The cabinets despoiled of their jewels. And my Louis XVI candelabra, and the Regent chandelier, and my 12th century Virgin. He ran from one spot to another in wildest despair. He recalled the purchase price of each article, added up the figures, counted his losses, pell-mell, in confused words and unfinished phrases. He stamped with rage. He groaned with grief. He acted like a ruined man whose only hope is suicide. If anything could have consoled him, it would have been the stupefaction displayed by Ganimard. The famous detective did not move. He appeared to be petrified. He examined the room in a listless manner. The windows closed, the locks on the doors intact, not a break in the ceiling, not a hole in the floor. Everything was in perfect order. The theft had been carried out methodically, according to a logical and inexorable plan. "Arsène Lupin, Arsène Lupin," he muttered. Suddenly, as if moved by anger, he rushed upon his 2 assistants and shook them violently. They did not awaken. "The devil!" he cried. "Can it be possible?" He leaned over them and, in turn, examined them closely. They were asleep, but their response was unnatural. "They have been drugged," he said to the Baron. "By whom?" "By him, of course, or his men under his direction. That work bears his stamp. In that case I am lost. Nothing can be done. Nothing, assented Ganimard. It is dreadful. It is monstrous. Lodge a complaint. What good will that do? Oh, it is well to try it. The law has some resources. The law. Bah! It is useless. You represent the law, and at this moment, when you should be looking for a clue and trying to discover something, you do not even stir. Discover something with Arsène Lupin. Why, my dear monsieur, Arsène Lupin never leaves any clue behind him. He leaves nothing to chance. Sometimes I think he put himself in my way and simply allowed me to arrest him in America. Then I must renounce my pictures. He has taken the gems of my collection. I would give a fortune to recover them. If there is no other way, let him name his own price. Ganimard regarded the Baron attentively, as he said, "Now, that is sensible. Will you stick to it?" "Yes, yes. But why?" "An idea that I have." "What is it?" "We will discuss it later, if the official examination does not succeed. But not one word about me, if you wish my assistance." He added, between his teeth, "It is true I have nothing to boast of in this affair." The assistants were gradually regaining consciousness with a bewildered air of people who came out of a hypnotic sleep. They opened their eyes and looked at them in astonishment. Ganimard questioned them. They remembered nothing. "But you must have seen someone?" "No." "Can't you remember?" "No, no." "Did you drink anything?" They considered a moment, and then one of them replied, "Yes, I drank a little water." "Out of that carafe?" "Yes." "So did I," declared the other. Ganimard smelled and tasted it. It had no particular taste and no odour. "Come," he said, "we are wasting our time here. One can't solve an Arsène Lupin problem in 5 minutes. But, by Jove, I swear I will catch him again." The same day, a charge of burglary was duly performed by Baron Cahorn against Arsène Lupin, a prisoner in the prison de la Santé. The Baron afterwards regretted making the charge against Lupin when he saw his castle delivered over to the gendarmes, the prosecutor, the examining magistrate, the newspaper reporters and photographers, and a throng of idle curiosity-seekers. The affair soon became a topic of general discussion, and the name of Arsène Lupin excited the public imagination to such an extent that the newspapers filled their columns with the most fantastic stories of his exploits which found ready credence amongst their readers. But the letter of Arsène Lupin that was published in the Echo de France, no one ever knew how the newspaper obtained it, that letter in which Baron Cahorn was impudently warned of the coming theft, caused considerable excitement. The most fabulous theories were advanced. Some recalled the existence of the famous subterranean tunnels, and that was the line of research pursued by the officers of the law, who searched the house from top to bottom, questioned every stone, studied the wainscoting and the chimneys, the window frames and the girders in the ceilings. By the light of torches, they examined the immense cellars where the lords of Moloches were wont to store their munitions and provisions. They sounded the rocky foundation to its very centre. But it was all in vain. They discovered no trace of a subterranean tunnel. No secret passage existed. But the eager public declared that the pictures and furniture could not vanish like so many ghosts. They are substantial, material things, and require doors and windows for their exits and their entrances, and so do the people that remove them. Who were those people? How did they gain access to the castle? And how did they leave it? The police officers of Rouen, convinced of their own impotence, solicited the assistance of the Parisian detective force. Monsieur de Douys, chief of the Charite, sent the best sleuths of the Iron Brigade. He himself spent 48 hours at the castle, but met with no success. Then he sent for Ganimard, whose past services had proved so useful when all else failed. Ganimard listened in silence to the instructions of his superior. Then, shaking his head, he said, "In my opinion, it is useless to ransack the castle. The solution of the problem lies elsewhere." "Where, then?" "With Arsène Lupin." "With Arsène Lupin. To support that theory, we must admit his intervention." "I do admit it. In fact, I consider it quite certain." "Come, Ganimard, that is absurd. Arsène Lupin is in prison." "I grant you that Arsène Lupin is in prison, closely guarded, but he must have fetters on his feet, manacles on his wrists, and a gag in his mouth before I change my opinion." "Why so obstinate, Ganimard?" "Because Arsène Lupin is the only man in France of sufficient calibre to invent and carry out a scheme of that magnitude." "Mere words, Ganimard." "But true ones. Look, what are they doing? Searching for subterranean passages, stones swinging on pivots, and other nonsense of that kind. But Lupin doesn't employ such old-fashioned methods. He is a modern cracksman, right up to date." "And how would you proceed?" "I should ask your permission to spend an hour with him." "In his cell?" "Yes. During the return trip from America we became very friendly, and I venture to say that if he can give me any information without compromising himself, he will not hesitate to save me from incurring useless trouble." It was shortly after noon when Ganimard entered the cell of Arsène Lupin. The latter, who was lying on his bed, raised his head and uttered a cry of apparent joy. "Ah, this is a real surprise. My dear Ganimard here. Ganimard himself. In my chosen retreat, I have felt a desire for many things, but my fondest wish was to receive you here. Very kind of you, I am sure." "Not at all. You know I hold you in the highest regard. I am proud of it. I have always said, Ganimard is our best detective. He is almost, you see how candid I am, he is almost as clever as Sherlock Holmes. But I am sorry that I cannot offer you anything better than this hard stool. And no refreshments. Not even a glass of beer. Of course, you will excuse me, as I am here only temporarily." Ganimard smiled, and accepted the proffered seat. Then the prisoner continued, "Mon Dieu, how pleased I am to see the face of an honest man. I am so tired of those devils of spies who come here 10 times a day to ransack my pockets and my cell to satisfy themselves that I am not preparing to escape. The government is very solicitous on my account. It is quite right. Why so? I would be quite content if they would allow me to live in my own quiet way. On other people's money. Quite so. That would be so simple. But here I am joking, and you are, no doubt, in a hurry. So let us come to business. Ganimard, to what do I owe the honour of this visit?" "The Cahorn affair," declared Ganimard frankly. "Ah, wait. One moment. You see, I have had so many affairs. First, let me fix in my mind the circumstances of this particular case. Ah, yes, now I have it. The Cahorn affair. Malochy's castle, Seine inférieure, 2 Rubens, a Watteau, and a few trifling articles. Trifling! Oh, my goodness, all that is of slight importance. But it suffices to know that the affair interests you. How can I serve you, Ganimard? Must I explain to you what steps the authorities have taken in the matter? Not at all. I have read the newspapers, and I will frankly state that you have made very little progress. And that is the reason I have come to see you. I am entirely at your service. In the first place, the Cahorn affair was managed by you, from A to Z. The letter of warning, the telegram, all mine. I ought to have the receipts somewhere. Arsène opened the drawer of a small table of plain white wood which, with the bed and stool, constituted all the furniture in his cell, and took therefrom 2 scraps of paper which he handed to Ganimard. "Ah!" exclaimed the detective in surprise. "I thought you were closely guarded and searched, and I find that you read the newspapers and collected postal receipts. Bah! These people are so stupid. They open the lining of my vest, they examine the soles of my shoes, they sound the walls of my cell, but they never imagine that Arsène Lupin would be foolish enough to choose such a simple hiding-place." Ganimard laughed, as he said, "What a droll fellow you are! Really, you bewilder me. But come now, tell me about the Cahorn affair." Oh, not quite so fast. You would rob me of all my secrets, expose all my little tricks. That is a very serious matter. Was I wrong to count on your complaisance? No, Ganimard, and since you insist. Arsène Lupin paced his cell 2 or 3 times. Then, stopping before Ganimard, he asked, "What do you think of my letter to the Baron? I think you were amusing yourself by playing to the gallery." "Ah, playing in the gallery. Come, Ganimard, I thought you knew me better. Do I, Arsène Lupin, ever waste my time on such puerilities? Would I have written that letter if I could have robbed the Baron without writing to him? I want you to understand that the letter was indispensable. It was the motor that set the whole machine in motion. Now, let us discuss together a scheme for the robbery of the Malochy's castle. Are you willing? Yes, proceed. Well, let us suppose a castle carefully closed and barricaded like that of the Baron Cahorn. Am I to abandon my scheme and renounce the treasures that I covet, upon the pretext that the castle which holds them is inaccessible? Evidently not. Should I make an assault upon the castle at the head of a band of adventurers, as they did in ancient times? That would be foolish. Can I gain admittance by stealth or cunning? Impossible. Then there is only one way open to me. I must have the owner of the castle invite me to it. That is surely an original method. And how easy! Let us suppose that one day the owner receives a letter warning him that a notorious burglar known as Arsène Lupin is plotting to rob him. What will he do? Send a letter to the prosecutor. Who will laugh at him, because the said Arsène Lupin is actually in prison? Then, in his anxiety and fear, the simple man will ask the assistance of the first comer. Will he not? Very likely. And if he happens to read in a country newspaper that a celebrated detective is spending his vacation in a neighbouring town, he will seek that detective. Of course. But, on the other hand, let us presume that, having foreseen that state of affairs, the said Arsène Lupin has requested one of his friends to visit Caudebec, make the acquaintance of the editor of the Réveil, a newspaper to which the Baron is a subscriber, and let said editor understand that such person is the celebrated detective. Then what will happen? The editor will announce in the reveil the presence in Caudebec of said detective. Exactly, and one of two things will happen. Either the fish, I mean Cahorn, will not bite and nothing will happen, or, what is more likely, he will run and greedily swallow the bait. Thus, behold my Baron Cahorn imploring the assistance of one of my friends against me. Original, indeed. Of course, the pseudo-detective at first refuses to give any assistance. On top of that comes the telegram from Arsène Lupin. The frightened Baron rushes once more to my friend and offers him a definite sum of money for his services. My friend accepts and summons two members of our band, who, during the night, whilst Cahorn is under the watchful eye of his protector, removes certain articles by way of the window, and lowers them with ropes into a nice little launch chartered for the occasion. Simple, isn't it? Marvellous! Marvellous! Exclaimed Ganimard. The boldness of the scheme and the ingenuity of all its details are beyond criticism. But who is the detective whose name and fame served as a magnet to attract the Baron and draw him into your net? There is only one name that could do it, only one, and that is Arsène Lupin's personal enemy, the most illustrious Ganimard. Yourself, Ganimard. And really, it is very funny. If you go there, and the Baron decides to talk, you will find that it will be your duty to arrest yourself, just as you arrested me in America. Ha! The revenge is really amusing. I cause Ganimard to arrest Ganimard. Arsène Lupin laughed heartily. The detective, greatly vexed, bit his lips. To him the joke was quite devoid of humour. The arrival of a prison guard gave Ganimard an opportunity to recover himself. The man brought Arsène Lupin's luncheon, furnished by a neighbouring restaurant. After depositing the tray upon the table, the guard retired. Lupin broke his bread, ate a few morsels, and continued, "But rest easy, my dear Ganimard. You will not go to Malocchi's. I can tell you something that will astonish you. The Cahorn affair is on the point of being settled. Excuse me, I have just seen the chief of the Charite." "What of that? Does Monsieur Dudouis know my business better than I do myself? You will learn that Ganimard, excuse me, that the pseudo-Ganimard still remains on very good terms with the Baron. The latter has authorized him to negotiate a very delicate transaction with me, and at the present moment, in consideration of a certain sum, it is probable that the Baron has recovered possession of his pictures and other treasures, and on their return he will withdraw his complaint. Thus there is no longer any theft, and the law must abandon the case." Ganimard regarded the prisoner with a bewildered air. "And how do you know all that?" "I have just received the telegram I was expecting." "You have just received a telegram?" "This very moment, my dear friend. Out of politeness, I did not wish to read it in your presence. But if you will permit me—" "You are joking, Lupin." "My dear friend, if you will be so kind as to break that egg, you will learn for yourself that I am not joking." Mechanically, Ganimard obeyed, and cracked the egg-shell with the blade of a knife. He uttered a cry of surprise. The shell contained nothing but a small piece of blue paper. At the request of Arsène, he unfolded it. It was a telegram, or rather a portion of a telegram from which the postmarks had been removed. It read as follows: "Contract closed. 100,000 balls delivered. All well." 100,000 balls, said Ganimard. "Yes, 100,000 francs." Very little, but then, these are hard times, and I have some heavy bills to meet. If you only knew my budget. Living in the city comes very high." Ganimard arose. His ill humour had disappeared. He reflected for a moment, glancing over the whole affair in an effort to discover a weak point. Then, in a tone and manner that betrayed his admiration of the prisoner, he said, "Fortunately, we do not have a dozen such as you to deal with. If we did, we would have to close up shop." Arsène Lupin assumed a modest air, as he replied, "Bah! A person must have some diversion to occupy his leisure hours, especially when he is in prison." "What?" exclaimed Ganimard. "Your trial, your defence, the examination, isn't that sufficient to occupy your mind?" "No, because I have decided not to be present at my trial." "Oh, oh!" Arsène Lupin repeated, positively, "I shall not be present at my trial." "Really?" "Ah, my dear monsieur, do you suppose I am going to rot upon the wet straw? You insult me. Arsène Lupin remains in prison just as long as it pleases him, and not 1 minute more. Perhaps it would have been more prudent if you had avoided getting there," said the detective, ironically. "Ah, monsieur jests? Monsieur must remember that he had the honour to effect my arrest. Know then, my worthy friend, that no one, not even you, could have placed a hand upon me if a much more important event had not occupied my attention at that critical moment." "You astonish me. A woman was looking at me, Ganimard, and I loved her. Do you fully understand what that means? To be under the eyes of a woman that one loves? I cared for nothing in the world but that. And that is why I am here. Permit me to say, you have been here a long time. In the first place, I wish to forget. Do not laugh. It was a delightful adventure, and it is still a tender memory. Besides, I have been suffering from neurasthenia. Life is so feverish these days that it is necessary to take the rest cure occasionally, and I find this spot a sovereign remedy for my tired nerves. Arsène Lupin, you are not a bad fellow after all." "Thank you," said Lupin. "Ganimard, this is Friday. On Wednesday next, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I will smoke my cigar at your house in the Rue Pergolese. Arsène Lupin, I will expect you." They shook hands like two old friends who valued each other at their true worth. Then the detective stepped to the door. "Ganimard!" "What is it?" asked Ganimard as he turned back. "You have forgotten your watch." "My watch?" "Yes, it strayed into my pocket." He returned the watch, excusing himself. "Pardon me. A bad habit. Because they have taken mine is no reason why I should take yours. Besides, I have a chronometer here that satisfies me fairly well." He took from the drawer a large gold watch and heavy chain. "From whose pocket did that come?" asked Ganimard. Arsène Lupin gave a hasty glance at the initials engraved on the watch. "J.B. Who the devil can that be? Ah, yes, I remember. Jules Bouvier, the judge who conducted my examination. A charming fellow. Chapter 3. The Escape of Arsène Lupin. Arsène Lupin had just finished his meal and taken an excellent gold-banded cigar from his pocket, which he was examining with unusual care. Just then the door of his cell opened. He barely had time to throw the cigar into a drawer and move away from the table. The guard entered. It was time for exercise. "I was waiting for you, my dear boy," exclaimed Lupin, in his usual good humour. They went out together. As soon as they had disappeared around a turn in the corridor, two men entered the cell and began a thorough search. One was Inspector Diuzzi, the other Inspector Folenfant. They suspected Arsène Lupin was communicating with his accomplices outside the prison. The previous evening, the Grand Journal had published these lines addressed to its court reporter. "Monsieur, in a recent article, you referred to me in most unjustifiable terms. Some days before my trial begins, I will call you to account. Arsène Lupin." The handwriting was certainly Arsène Lupin's. Evidently, he sent letters and, no doubt, received them. It was clear he was preparing for the escape he'd so arrogantly announced. The situation had become intolerable. Working with the examining judge, the chief of the Charité, Monsieur Dudouis, had visited the prison. He instructed the jailer on the necessary precautions to ensure Lupin's security. At the same time, he sent the two inspectors to search the prisoner's cell. They meticulously searched everywhere, lifted every stone, ransacked the bed, did everything customary in such a case. But they discovered nothing and were about to give up when the guard rushed in and said, "The drawer. Look in the table drawer. When I came in just now, he was closing it." They opened the drawer, and Diuzzi exclaimed, "Ah, we have him this time." Folenfant stopped him. "Wait a moment. The chief will want to make an inventory. This is a very choice cigar. Leave it there and notify the chief." 2 minutes later, Monsieur Dudouis examined the drawer's contents. First, he found a bundle of newspaper clippings about Arsène Lupin from the Argus de la Presse. Then, a tobacco box, a pipe, some onion peel paper, and 2 books. He read the titles. One was an English edition of Carlyle's Hero Worship, the other, a charming Elsevier edition, in modern binding, of the Manual of Epictetus, a German translation published in Leiden in 1634. Examining the books, he found all the pages underlined and annotated. Were they a code for correspondence, or did they simply show the reader's studious nature? He then examined the tobacco box and the pipe. Finally, he picked up the famous gold-banded cigar. "Victor!" he exclaimed. "Our friend smokes a good cigar. It's a Henry Clay." With the automatic habit of a smoker, he brought the cigar to his ear and squeezed it to make it crack. Immediately, he cried out in surprise. The cigar had yielded under his fingers. He examined it more closely and quickly discovered something white between the tobacco leaves. Delicately, with a pin, he withdrew a roll of very thin paper, scarcely larger than a toothpick. It was a letter. He unrolled it and found these words, written in a feminine hand. "The basket has taken the place of the others. 8 out of 10 are ready. On pressing the outer foot, the plate goes downward. From 12 to 16 every day. HP will wait. But where? Reply at once. Rest easy. Your friend is watching over you." Monsieur Dudouis reflected a moment, then said, "It is quite clear. The basket, the 8 compartments, from 12 to 16 means from 12 to 4 o'clock. But this HP that will wait? HP must mean automobile. HP, horsepower, is how they indicate motor strength. A 24 HP is a 24 horsepower automobile." Then he rose and asked, "Has the prisoner finished his breakfast?" "Yes." and since he hasn't yet read the message, as the cigar's condition proves, it's probable he just received it. How? In his food. Concealed in his bread or a potato, perhaps. Impossible. His food was allowed to be brought in simply to trap him, but we've never found anything in it. We will look for Lupin's reply this evening. Detain him outside for a few minutes. I shall take this to the examining judge, and if he agrees with me, we will have the letter photographed at once. In an hour, you can replace the letter in the drawer in a cigar similar to this one. The prisoner must have no cause for suspicion. It was with a certain curiosity that Monsieur Dudouis returned to the prison that evening, accompanied by Inspector Dieuzy. 3 empty plates sat on the stove in the corner. "He has eaten?" "Yes," replied the guard. "Dieuzy, please cut that macaroni into very small pieces and open that bread roll." "Nothing." "No, Chief." Monsieur Dudouis examined the plates, the fork, the spoon, and the knife, an ordinary knife with a rounded blade. He turned the handle to the left, then to the right. It yielded and unscrewed. The knife was hollow and served as a hiding-place for a sheet of paper. "Poor," he said, "that's not very clever for a man like Arsène. But we mustn't lose any time. You, Dieuzy, go and search the restaurant." Then he read the note. "I trust to you. H.P. will follow at a distance every day. I will go ahead. Au revoir, dear friend." "At last," cried Monsieur Dudouis, rubbing his hands gleefully, "I think we have the affair in our own hands. A little strategy on our part, and the escape will be a success as far as the arrest of his confederates is concerned." "But if Arsène Lupin slips through your fingers?" suggested the guard. "We will have enough men to prevent that. If, however, he displays too much cleverness, ma foi, so much the worse for him. As for his band of robbers, since the chief refuses to speak, the others must." Indeed, Arsène Lupin had very little to say. For several months, Monsieur Jules Bouvier, the examining judge, had exerted himself in vain. The investigation had been reduced to a few uninteresting arguments between the judge and the advocate, Maître Danval, a leading member of the bar. From time to time, out of courtesy, Arsène Lupin would speak. One day he said, "Yes, Monsieur le Judge, I quite agree with you. The robbery of the Credit Lyonnais, the theft in the Rue de Babylone, the issue of counterfeit banknotes, the burglaries at the various châteaux, Armesnil, Gouret, Imblevain, Groseilliers, Malocky's, all my work, monsieur, I did it all." "Then will you explain to me?" "It is useless. I confess everything in one go. Everything, and even 10 times more than you know nothing about." Wearied by his fruitless task, the judge had suspended his examinations, but he resumed them after the 2 intercepted messages were brought to his attention, and regularly, at midday, Arsène Lupin was taken from the prison to the depot in the prison van with a number of other prisoners. They returned about 3 or 4 o'clock. Now, one afternoon, this return trip was made under unusual conditions. The other prisoners not having been examined, it was decided to take back Arsène Lupin first. Thus, he found himself alone in the vehicle. These prison vans, commonly called salad baskets, are divided lengthwise by a central corridor from which 10 compartments open, 5 on either side. Each compartment is arranged so that the occupant must assume and remain in a sitting posture. Consequently, the 5 prisoners are seated one upon the other, yet separated by partitions. A municipal guard, standing at one end, watches over the corridor. Arsène was placed in the third cell on the right, and the heavy vehicle started. He carefully noted when they left the Quai de l'Horloge and when they passed the Palais de Justice. Then, about the centre of the Pont Saint-Michel, with his outer foot, that is, his right foot, he pressed the metal plate that closed his cell. Immediately, something clicked, and the metal plate moved. He could tell he was located between the two wheels. He waited, keeping a sharp lookout. The vehicle was proceeding slowly along the boulevard Saint-Michel. At the corner of Saint-Germain, it stopped. A dray horse had fallen. Traffic was interrupted, and a vast throng of cabs and omnibuses had gathered there. Arsène Lupin looked out. Another prison van had stopped close to the one he occupied. He moved the plate still farther, put his foot on one of the wheel spokes, and leaped to the ground. A coachman saw him, roared with laughter, then tried to raise an outcry, but his voice was lost in the noise of the traffic, which had begun to move again. Moreover, Arsène Lupin was already far away. He ran a few steps, but once on the sidewalk, he turned and looked around. He seemed to sniff the wind like a person uncertain which direction to take. Then, having decided, he put his hands in his pockets, and, with the careless air of an idle stroller, he proceeded up the boulevard. It was a warm, bright autumn day, and the cafés were full. He took a seat on the terrace of one of them. He ordered a bock and a packet of cigarettes. He emptied his glass slowly, smoked one cigarette, and lit a second. Then he asked the waiter to send the proprietor to him. When the proprietor came, Arsène spoke to him in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I regret to say, monsieur, I have forgotten my pocket-book. Perhaps, on the strength of my name, you will be pleased to give me credit for a few days. I am Arsène Lupin." The proprietor looked at him, thinking he was joking. But Arsène repeated, "Lupin, prisoner at the Santé, but now a fugitive. I venture to assume that the name inspires you with perfect confidence in me." And he walked away, amidst shouts of laughter, while the proprietor stood amazed. Lupin strolled along the Rue Soufflot and turned into the Rue Saint-Jacques. He pursued his way slowly, smoking his cigarettes and looking into the shop windows. At the Boulevard de Port-Royal, he took his bearings, discovered where he was, and then walked in the direction of the Rue de la Santé. The high, forbidding walls of the prison were now before him. He pulled his hat forward to shade his face. Then, approaching the sentinel, he asked, "Is this the prison de la Santé?" "Yes. I wish to regain my cell. The van left me on the way, and I would not abuse." "Now, young man, move along, quick," growled the sentinel. "Pardon me, but I must pass through that gate, and if you prevent Arsène Lupin from entering the prison, it will cost you dear, my friend." "Arsène Lupin! What are you talking about?" "I am sorry I don't have a card with me," said Arsène, fumbling in his pockets. The sentinel eyed him from head to foot in astonishment. Then, without a word, he rang a bell. The iron gate was partly opened, and Arsène stepped inside. Almost immediately he encountered the prison-keeper, gesticulating and feigning violent anger. Arsène smiled and said, "Come, monsieur, don't play that game with me." "What?" "They take the precaution to carry me alone in the van, prepare a nice little obstruction, and imagine I'm going to take to my heels and rejoin my friends. Well, and what about the 20 agents of the Charite who accompanied us on foot, in cabs, and on bicycles? No, the arrangement did not please me. I should not have gotten away alive. Tell me, monsieur, did they count on that?" He shrugged his shoulders and added, "I beg of you, monsieur, not to worry about me. When I wish to escape, I shall not require any assistance." 2 days later, the Echo de France, which had apparently become the official reporter of Arsène Lupin's exploits, it was, he said, was one of its principal shareholders, published a most complete account of this attempted escape. The exact wording of the messages exchanged between the prisoner and his mysterious friend, the means by which the correspondence was constructed, the complicity of the police, the promenade on the Boulevard Saint-Michel, the incident at the Café Soufflot, everything was disclosed. It was known that Inspector Diuzzi's search of the restaurant and its waiters had been fruitless, and the public also learned an extraordinary thing that demonstrated the infinite variety of resources Lupin possessed. The prison van in which he was being carried was specially prepared for the occasion and substituted by his accomplices for one of the 6 vans that served the prison. No one doubted Arsène Lupin's next escape. He announced it himself, in categorical terms, in a reply to Monsieur Bouvier the day after his attempted escape. The judge, having made a jest about the affair, Arsène was annoyed, and firmly eyeing the judge, he said emphatically, "Listen to me, monsieur. I give you my word of honor that this attempted flight was simply preliminary to my general plan of escape." "I do not understand," said the judge. "It is not necessary that you should understand." And when the judge, in the course of that examination, which was reported at length in the columns of the Echo de France, when the judge sought to resume his investigation, Arsène Lupin exclaimed, with an assumed air of lassitude, mon Dieu, what's the use? All these questions are of no importance." "What? No importance?" cried the judge. "No, because I shall not be present at the trial." "You will not be present?" "No, I have fully decided on that, and nothing will change my mind." Such assurance, combined with the inexplicable indiscretions Arsène committed every day, served to annoy and mystify the officers of the law. There were secrets known only to Arsène Lupin, secrets he alone could divulge. But for what purpose did he reveal them, and how? Arsène Lupin was moved to another cell. The judge closed his preliminary investigation. No further proceedings were taken in his case for 2 months. During this time, Arsène was seen almost constantly lying on his bed with his face turned toward the wall. The change of cell seemed to discourage him. He refused to see his lawyer. He exchanged only a few necessary words with his keepers. During the fortnight preceding his trial, he resumed his vigorous life. He complained of a lack of air. Consequently, early every morning, he was allowed to exercise in the courtyard, guarded by 2 men. Public curiosity had not died out. Every day, it was expected to be regaled with news of his escape, and it's true, he had gained considerable public sympathy due to his verve, his gaiety, his diversity, his inventive genius, and the mystery of his life. Arsène Lupin must escape. It was his inevitable fate. The public expected it, and was surprised that the event had been delayed so long. Every morning, the prefect of police asked his secretary, "Well, has he escaped yet?" "No, monsieur le prefect. Tomorrow, probably." And the day before the trial, a gentleman called at the office of the Grand Journal, asked to see the court reporter, threw his card in the reporter's face, and walked rapidly away. These words were written on the card: "Arsène Lupin always keeps his promises." It was under these conditions that the trial commenced. An enormous crowd gathered at the court. Everybody wished to see the famous Arsène Lupin. They gleefully anticipated that the prisoner would play some audacious pranks upon the judge. Lawyers and magistrates, reporters and men of the world, actresses and society women were crowded together on the benches provided for the public. It was a dark, sombre day, with a steady downpour of rain. Only a dim light pervaded the courtroom, and the spectators caught a very indistinct view of the prisoner when the guards brought him in. But his heavy, shambling walk, the way he dropped into his seat, and his passive, stupid appearance were not at all prepossessing. Several times his lawyer, one of Monsieur Danville's assistants, spoke to him, but he simply shook his head and said nothing. The clerk read the indictment. Then the judge spoke. "Prisoner at the bar, stand up. Your name, age, and occupation." Receiving no reply, the judge repeated, "Your name? I ask you your name." A thick, slow voice muttered, "Baudru Desire." A murmur of surprise pervaded the courtroom. But the judge proceeded. "Baudru Desire? Ah, a new alias. Well, as you have already assumed a dozen different names, and this one is, no doubt, as imaginary as the others, we will adhere to the name of Arsène Lupin, by which you are more generally known." The judge referred to his notes and continued, "For, despite the most diligent search, your past history remains unknown. Your case is unique in the annals of crime. We know not who you are, whence you came, your birth and breeding. All is a mystery to us. 3 years ago, you appeared in our midst as Arsène Lupin, presenting to us a strange combination of intelligence and perversion, immorality and generosity. Our knowledge of your life prior to that date is vague and problematic. It may be that the man called Rostat, who, 8 years ago, worked with Dixon, the prestidigitator, was none other than Arsène Lupin. It is probable that the Russian student who, 6 years ago, attended the laboratory of Dr. Altier at the St. Louis Hospital, and who often astonished the doctor by the ingenuity of his hypotheses on bacteriology and the boldness of his experiments in diseases of the skin, was none other than Arsène Lupin. It is probable, also, that Arsène Lupin was the professor who introduced the Japanese art of jiu-jitsu to the Parisian public. We have some reason to believe that Arsène Lupin was the bicyclist who won the Grand Prix de l'Exposition, received his 10,000 francs, and was never heard of again. Arsène Lupin may have been, also, the person who saved so many lives through the little dormer window at the charity bazaar, and, at the same time, picked their pockets. The judge paused for a moment, then continued. "Such is that epoch which seems to have been utilized by you in thorough preparation for the warfare you have since waged against society, a methodical apprenticeship in which you developed your strength, energy, and skill to the highest point possible. Do you acknowledge the accuracy of these facts?" During this discourse, the prisoner had stood balancing himself, first on one foot, then on the other, with shoulders stooped and arms inert. Under the strongest light, one could observe his extreme thinness, his hollow cheeks, his projecting cheekbones, his earthy-coloured face dotted with small red spots and framed in a rough, straggling beard. Prison life had caused him to age and wither. He had lost the youthful face and elegant figure we had seen portrayed so often in the newspapers. It appeared as if he had not heard the question posed by the judge. Twice it was repeated to him. Then he raised his eyes, seemed to reflect. Then, making a desperate effort, he murmured, "Baudru, desire." The judge smiled as he said, "I do not understand the theory of your defense, Arsène Lupin. If you are seeking to avoid responsibility for your crimes on the ground of imbecility, such a line of defense is open to you. But I shall proceed with the trial and pay no heed to your vagaries." He then narrated at length the various thefts, swindles, and forgeries charged against Lupin. Sometimes he questioned the prisoner, but the latter simply grunted or remained silent. The examination of witnesses commenced. Some of the evidence given was immaterial, other portions seemed more important, but through all of it there ran a vein of contradictions and inconsistencies. A wearisome obscurity enveloped the proceedings until Detective Ganimard was called as a witness. Then interest was revived. From the beginning, the veteran detective's actions appeared strange and unaccountable. He was nervous and ill at ease. Several times he looked at the prisoner, with obvious doubt and anxiety. Then, with his hands resting on the rail in front of him, he recounted the events in which he had participated, including his pursuit of the prisoner across Europe and his arrival in America. He was listened to with great avidity, as his capture of Arsène Lupin was well known to everyone through the press. Toward the close of his testimony, after referring to his conversations with Arsène Lupin, he stopped twice, embarrassed and undecided. It was apparent that he was possessed of some thought which he feared to utter. The judge said to him, sympathetically, "If you are ill, you may retire for the present." No, but—" He stopped, looked sharply at the prisoner, and said, "I ask permission to scrutinize the prisoner at closer range. There is some mystery about him that I must solve." He approached the accused man, examined him attentively for several minutes, then returned to the witness stand, and, in an almost solemn voice, he said, "I declare on oath that the prisoner now before me is not Arsène Lupin." A profound silence followed the statement. The judge, nonplussed for a moment, exclaimed, "Ah, what do you mean? That is absurd." The detective continued, "At first sight there is a certain resemblance, but if you carefully consider the nose, the mouth, the hair, the color of skin, you will see that it is not Arsène Lupin. And the eyes? Did he ever have those alcoholic eyes? Come, witness. What do you mean? Do you pretend to say that we are trying the wrong man? In my opinion, yes. Arsène Lupin has, in some manner, contrived to put this poor devil in his place, unless this man is a willing accomplice." This dramatic denouement caused much laughter and excitement among the spectators. The judge adjourned the trial and sent for Monsieur Bouvier, the jailer, and guards employed in the prison. When the trial was resumed, Monsieur Bouvier and the jailer examined the accused, and declared that there was only a very slight resemblance between the prisoner and Arsène Lupin. "Well, then," exclaimed the judge, "who is this man? Where does he come from? What is he in prison for?" 2 of the prison guards were called, and both of them declared that the prisoner was Arsène Lupin. The judge breathed once more, but one of the guards then said, Yes, I think it is he." "What?" cried the judge impatiently. "You think it is he? What do you mean by that?" "Well, I saw very little of the prisoner. He was placed in my charge in the evening, and, for 2 months, he seldom stirred, but lay on his bed with his face to the wall." "What about the time prior to those 2 months?" "Before that, he occupied a cell in another part of the prison. He was not in cell 24. Here the head jailer interrupted and said, "We changed him to another cell after his attempted escape. But you, monsieur, you have seen him during those 2 months?" "I had no occasion to see him. He was always quiet and orderly." "And this prisoner is not Arsène Lupin?" "No." "Then who is he?" demanded the judge. "I do not know." "Then we have before us a man who was substituted for Arsène Lupin 2 months ago. How do you explain that?" "I cannot." In absolute despair, the judge turned to the accused and addressed him in a conciliatory tone. "Prisoner, can you tell me how, and since when, you became an inmate of the prison de la Santé?" The judge's engaging manner was calculated to disarm mistrust and awaken the accused man's understanding. He tried to reply. Finally, under clever and gentle questioning, he succeeded in framing a few phrases from which the following story was gleaned. 2 months ago, he had been taken to the depot, examined, and released. As he was leaving the building, a free man, he was seized by 2 guards and placed in the prison van. Since then, he has occupied cell 24. He was content there, with plenty to eat, and he slept well, so he did not complain. All that seemed probable. Amidst the mirth and excitement of the spectators, the judge adjourned the trial until the story could be investigated and verified. The following facts were at once established by an examination of the prison records. 8 weeks before, a man named Baudru Desire had slept at the depot. He was released the next day and left the depot at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. On the same day at 2 o'clock, having been examined for the last time, Arsène Lupin left the depot in a prison van. Had the guards made a mistake? Had they been deceived by the resemblance and carelessly substituted this man for their prisoner? Another question suggested itself. Had the substitution been arranged in advance? In that event, Baudru must have been an accomplice and must have caused his own arrest for the express purpose of taking Lupin's place. But then, by what miracle had such a plan, based on a series of improbable chances, been carried to success? Baudru Desire was turned over to the anthropological service. They had never seen anything like him. However, they easily traced his past history. He was known at Courbevoie, at Asnières, and at Levallois. He lived on alms and slept in one of those rag-pickers' huts near the Barrière de Tournes. He had disappeared from there a year ago. Had he been enticed away by Arsène Lupin? There was no evidence to that effect, and even if that were so, it did not explain the prisoner's flight. That still remained a mystery. Among 20 theories which sought to explain it, not one was satisfactory. Of the escape itself there was no doubt, an escape that was incomprehensible, sensational, in which the public, as well as the officers of the law, could detect a carefully prepared plan, a combination of circumstances marvellously dovetailed, whereof the denouement fully justified the confident prediction of Arsène Lupin. I shall not be present at my trial. After a month of patient investigation, the problem remained unsolved. The poor devil of a Baudru could not be kept in prison indefinitely, and to place him on trial would be ridiculous. There was no charge against him. Consequently, he was released, but the chief of the Charite resolved to keep him under surveillance. This idea originated with Ganimard. From his point of view, there was neither complicity nor chance. Baudru was an instrument upon which Arsène Lupin had played with his extraordinary skill. Baudru, when set at liberty, would lead them to Arsène Lupin, or, at least, to some of his accomplices. The 2 inspectors, Folenfant and Dieuzy, were assigned to assist Ganimard. One foggy morning in January, the prison gates opened, and Baudru Désir stepped forth, a free man. At first, he appeared quite embarrassed and walked like a person who has no precise idea where he is going. He followed the Rue de la Santé and the Rue Saint-Jacques. He stopped in front of an old clothes shop, removed his jacket and vest, sold his vest, for which he received a few sous. Then, replacing his jacket, he proceeded on his way. He crossed the Seine. At the Châtelet, an omnibus passed him. He wished to enter it, but there was no room. The conductor advised him to secure a number, so he entered the waiting-room. Ganimard called to his two assistants, and, without removing his eyes from the waiting-room, he said to them, "Stop a carriage." "No, two. That will be better. I will go with one of you, and we will follow him." The men obeyed. Yet Baudru did not appear. Ganimard entered the waiting-room. It was empty. "Idiot that I am," he muttered. "I forgot there was another exit." There was an interior corridor extending from the waiting-room to the Rue Saint-Martin. Ganimard rushed through it and arrived just in time to observe Baudru on top of the Batignolles Jardin des Plantes omnibus as it was turning the corner of the Rue de Rivoli. He ran and caught the omnibus, but he had lost his two assistants. He must continue the pursuit alone. In his anger, he was inclined to seize the man by the collar without ceremony. Was it not with premeditation and by means of an ingenious ruse that his pretended imbecile had separated him from his assistants? He looked at Baudru. The latter was asleep on the bench, his head rolling from side to side, his mouth half opened, and an incredible expression of stupidity on his blotched face. No, such an adversary was incapable of deceiving old Ganimard. It was a stroke of luck, nothing more. At the Galeries Lafayette, the man leaped from the omnibus and took the La Muette tramway, following the Boulevard Haussmann and the Avenue Victor Hugo. Baudru alighted at La Muette station, and, with a nonchalant air, strolled into the Bois de Boulogne. He wandered through one path after another, and sometimes retraced his steps. What was he seeking? Had he any definite object? At the end of an hour he appeared faint from fatigue, and, noticing a bench, he sat down. The spot, not far from Auteuil, on the edge of a pond hidden among the trees, was absolutely deserted. After another half-hour had passed, Ganimard became impatient and resolved to speak to the man. He approached and took a seat beside Baudru, lit a cigarette, traced some figures in the sand with the end of his cane, and said, "It's a pleasant day." No response. But suddenly the man burst into laughter, a happy, mirthful laugh, spontaneous and irresistible. Ganimard felt his hair stand on end in horror and surprise. It was that laugh, that infernal laugh he knew so well. With a sudden movement, he seized the man by the collar and looked at him with a keen, penetrating gaze. He found that he no longer saw the man Baudru. To be sure, he saw Baudru, but at the same time he saw the other, the real man Lupin. He discovered the intense life in the eyes, he filled up the shrunken features, he perceived the real flesh beneath the flabby skin, the real mouth through the grimaces that deformed it. Those were the eyes and mouth of the other, and especially his keen, alert, mocking expression, so clear and youthful. "Arsène Lupin, Arsène Lupin," he stammered. Then, in a sudden fit of rage, he seized Lupin by the throat and tried to hold him down. In spite of his 50 years, he still possessed unusual strength. while his adversary was apparently in a weak condition. But the struggle was brief. Arsène Lupin made only a slight movement, and as suddenly as he had made the attack, Ganimard released his hold. His right arm fell inert, useless. "If you had taken lessons in jiu-jitsu at the Quai d'Orfèvres," said Lupin, "you would know that that blow is called audacious in Japanese. A second more, and I would have broken your arm, and that would have been just what you deserve. I am surprised that you, an old friend whom I respect, and before whom I voluntarily expose my incognito, should abuse my confidence in that violent manner. It is unworthy. Ah, what's the matter?" Ganimard did not reply. That escape for which he deemed himself responsible, was it not he, Ganimard, who, by his sensational evidence, had led the court into serious error? That escape appeared to him like a dark cloud on his professional career. A tear rolled down his cheek to his grey moustache. "Oh, mon Dieu, Ganimard, don't take it to heart. If you had not spoken, I would have arranged for someone else to do it. I couldn't allow poor Baudru Desire to be convicted." "Then," murmured Ganimard, "it was you that was there? And now you are here. It is I, always I, only I. Can it be possible? Oh, it is not the work of a sorcerer. Simply, as the judge remarked at the trial, the apprenticeship of a dozen years equips a man to cope successfully with all the obstacles in life. But your face, your eyes. You can understand that if I worked 18 months with Dr. Altier at the St. Louis Hospital, it was not out of love for the work. I considered that he, who would one day have the honor of calling himself Arsène Lupin, ought to be exempt from the ordinary laws governing appearance and identity. Appearance, that can be modified at will. For instance, a hypodermic injection of paraffin will puff up the skin at the desired spot. Pyrogallic acid will change your skin to that of an Indian. The juice of the greater celandine will adorn you with the most beautiful eruptions and tumours. Another chemical affects the growth of your beard and hair. Another changes the tone of your voice. Add to that 2 months of dieting in cell 24. Exercises repeated 1,000 times to enable me to hold my features in a certain grimace, to carry my head at a certain inclination, and adapt my back and shoulders to a stooping posture. Then 5 drops of atropine in the eyes to make them haggard and wild, and the trick is done. I do not understand how you deceived the guards. The change was progressive. The evolution was so gradual that they failed to notice it. But Baudru Desire? Baudru exists. He is a poor, harmless fellow whom I met last year, and really he bears a certain resemblance to me. Considering my arrest as a possible event, I took charge of Baudru and studied the points wherein we differed in appearance with a view to correcting them in my own person. My friends caused him to remain at the depot overnight, and to leave there the next day about the same hour as I did, a coincidence easily arranged. Of course, it was necessary to have a record of his detention at the depot in order to establish the fact that such a person was a reality. Otherwise, the police would have sought elsewhere to find out my identity. But in offering to them this excellent Baudru, it was inevitable, you understand, inevitable that they would seize upon him, and, despite the insurmountable difficulties of a substitution, they would prefer to believe in a substitution than confess their ignorance. "Yes, yes, of course," said Ganimard. "And then," exclaimed Arsène Lupin, "I held in my hands a trump card, an anxious public watching and waiting for my escape. And that is the fatal error into which you fell, you and the others, in the course of that fascinating game pending between me and the officers of the law, wherein the stake was my liberty. And you supposed that I was playing to the gallery, that I was intoxicated with my success. I, Arsène Lupin, guilty of such weakness. Oh, no. And no longer ago than the Cahorn affair, you said, when Arsène Lupin cries from the housetops that he will escape, he has some object in view. But, sapristi, you must understand that in order to escape, I must create, in advance, a public belief in that escape, a belief amounting to an article of faith, an absolute conviction, a reality as glittering as the sun. And I did create that belief that Arsène Lupin would escape, that Arsène Lupin would not be present at his trial. And when you gave your evidence and said, "That man is not Arsène Lupin," everybody was prepared to believe you. Had one person doubted it, had anyone uttered this simple restriction, "Suppose it is Arsène Lupin?" From that moment I was lost. If anyone had scrutinized my face, not imbued with the idea that I was not Arsène Lupin, as you and the others did at my trial, but with the idea that I might be Arsène Lupin, then, despite all my precautions, I should have been recognized. But I had no fear. Logically, psychologically, no one could entertain the idea that I was Arsène Lupin. He grasped Ganimard's hand. "Come, Ganimard, confess that on the Wednesday after our conversation in the Prison de la Santé, you expected me at your house at 4 o'clock, exactly as I said I would go." "And your prison van?" said Ganimard, evading the question. "A bluff. Some of my friends secured that old, unused van and wished to make the attempt. But I considered it impractical without a number of unusual circumstances aligning. However, I found it useful to carry out that attempted escape and give it the widest publicity. An audaciously planned escape, though not completed, gave the succeeding one the character of reality simply by anticipation. So that the cigar, hollowed by myself, as well as the knife, and the letters, written by me, and the mysterious correspondent, did not exist." Ganimard reflected for a moment, then said, "When the Anthropological Service had Baudru's case under consideration, why did they not perceive that his measurements coincided with those of Arsène Lupin?" "My measurements are not in existence." "Indeed. At least, they are false. I have given considerable attention to that question. In the first place, the Bertillon system records the visible marks of identification, and you have seen that they are not infallible. And after that, the measurements of the head, the fingers, the ears, etc. Of course, such measurements are more or less infallible." "Absolutely. No, but it costs money to get around them. Before we left America, one of the employees of the service there accepted a sum of money to insert false figures in my measurements. Consequently, Baudru's measurements should not agree with those of Arsène Lupin." After a short silence, Ganimard asked, "What are you going to do now?" "Now," replied Lupin, "I am going to take a rest, enjoy the best of food and drink, and gradually recover my former healthy condition. It is all very well to become Baudru or some other person on occasion, and to change your personality as you do your shirt, but you soon grow weary of the change. I feel exactly as I imagine the man who lost his shadow must have felt, and I shall be glad to be Arsène Lupin once more." He walked to and fro for a few minutes, then, stopping in front of Ganimard, he said, "You have nothing more to say, I suppose?" "Yes. I would like to know if you intend to reveal the true state of facts connected with your escape. The mistake that I made. Oh, no one will ever know that it was Arsène Lupin who was discharged. It is to my own interest to surround myself with mystery, and therefore I shall permit my escape to retain its almost miraculous character. So, Have no fear of that score, my dear friend. I shall say nothing. And now, good-bye. I am going out to dinner this evening, and have only sufficient time to dress. I thought you wanted a rest. Ah, there are duties to society that one cannot avoid. Tomorrow I shall rest. Where do you dine tonight? With the British ambassador.